Council. So I'm going to turn it over to Jordan. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I am Jordan Oster. I'm with the Iowa Environmental Council. If you're not familiar, we're a statewide membership organization. We're based here in Des Moines and have been around since 1995. We got some twin focuses within our organization on clean water and clean energy, and I'm on the clean energy side of the equation. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about this so-called sunshine tax, or what's been called an attempt to monopolize the sun. Yes, we're not in the beginning of a fight. We're actually in the middle of it. And over the last two legislative sessions, Iowa's monopoly utilities are working to take away the ability of customers to lower their bills long-term with direct personal investments. The utilities in Iowa are protected monopolies, each with their own carved-out territories. Unlike other products, you cannot choose where you shop for your energy, and you're captive to rate increases. Utilities are obviously essential. It's a great thing that we have the ability to keep the lights on and to be cool in the summer and to be warm in the winter. But we need to recognize that they're also profit motivated, and they serve investors as well as customers. It's pretty simple. They don't want customers finding ways to trim their energy use or to make their homes and businesses more efficient. A solar installation or efficiency upgrade represents to them a long-term loss of potential revenue. I must note the author of this bill, MidAmerican Energy, is not hurting. Last year they had a net profit of over $600 million in revenue. But before we dive in on solar, let's take a little look back. Last legislative session, the investor-owned utilities, municipal utilities, and rural electric cooperatives used one-party control in the State House to pass what we called the Christmas tree bill, because it gave the utilities everything they wanted in regards to slashing energy efficiency programs. Senate File 2311 capped utility efficiency programs, reducing the available energy efficiency programs rebates for customers by 66 to 75%. It is now more costly for Iowans to make energy efficiency upgrades to appliances, to HVAC, to equipment, to lighting, to insulation. Low-income homes, there's a program for low-income home weatherization, were slashed significantly as well. Those funds have reduced mightily. This harms Iowans with little resources and some of the oldest housing stock in the state. Because of this bill, instead of having a professional come to your house to conduct a free, detailed energy assessment, now Iowans will have to make do with a kit they order from the internet. More Iowans will have less efficient homes because of this bill passed last session. That means customers will waste more energy, and they will buy more energy, and they will live less comfortably. Solar energy is one of the few ways that electric customers can directly take control of their costs. And that is why it's being targeted by the so-called sunshine tax. The intent of this bill is to spoil the economics of customer-generated solar by making an investment in solar less feasible. If a solar system is infeasible for a customer, the customer will continue to be locked into the same amount of energy use into perpetuity, or will likely grow over time. So a solar system is a way to cut your costs, to lock in your costs, and reduce your amount of energy use. With this new sunshine tax, over the 25-year warranty life of a solar system, new customers will pay a minimum of $8,100. And that number could be much larger, as it's not actually defined in the bill, and that number is based on one MidAmerican press release where they named a $27 fee that would be charged to customers. We don't know what Alliant will charge. They haven't said that. And Alliant has 5, 6, 7 times more solar customers than MidAmerican. Stands to reason, too, that Alliant might charge a heftier sunshine tax on customers. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Fred here. We'll kind of go back and forth, but I just want to give a perspective that this is something that is ongoing. This is a process that's making it more difficult for Iowans to make those direct investments to reduce their energy costs.
Thanks, Jordan. My name is Fred Meharry, and I'm a retired school superintendent, and I've sold solar for about the last 6 years, so that's been my experience in this. And I want to start today and talk about why solar energy is so important. In 43 minutes, we receive enough energy from the sun on an average day that we can meet all of our electricity needs on Earth for 1 year. So solar is an incredible resource. And my position is that we should all benefit from that. It shouldn't be Mid-American and Alliant and the largest companies in Iowa who take control of that. So that's why I'm saying that we need to oppose House File 669 and Senate File 583, granting utilities more leverage. As Jordan pointed out, they already have a monopoly. I live in West Des Moines, and I'm on Mid-American, and I don't have any control over that. I can't go to Alliant or anyone else. That's where I am. If you're on Alliant, which is much higher, which is much more expensive electricity in Iowa, you're stuck. And what this bill will do is that it'll exert even more control over what happens to people in Iowa with their electricity bills. And Mid-American and Alliant are already guaranteed good-sized profits. And last year for Mid-American, and Mid-American is owned by Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett, last year they made at least $605 million in profits. That's not a bad deal. So I'm not overly concerned about what's going to happen to Mid-American. I'm more concerned about what's going to happen to all of us, and I'll talk about some other people that I think will really be hit if this goes through. This bill, or these bills would allow utilities to charge solar users at least $330 a year. And you may say, well, $330 a year, that's not that big of a deal. Well, what that $330 does is that disincentivizes a lot of people from considering solar. Because that's just one more expense. And a lot of people are going to go, nah, I don't want to do that. Because if you're going to do solar, you're going to invest some money in it. It's not $2,000 or $3,000. It's more than that. It's $30,000 on up. Okay, so let's look at the numbers for Mid-American. Mid-American has 750 solar users in Iowa. That represents less than 0.1% of all of their customers. And the energy that's generated by solar in Iowa is less than 1% of all the energy that's created. So we're a little speck on the wall compared to everything else. So then you ask the question, why are they pushing so hard against smaller solar users? And what's the big deal? Why are they running these ads, telling you that, oh my gosh, you're paying for their solar panels? Why are they making telephone calls? Yes. Why are they doing all of that? Well, the reason is, if solar takes off the way we think it may, this represents a threat to Mid-American and Alliance and some other utility companies' profits in the future. That's what this is all about, and to me, it's a power grab. Okay, so think about those ads for a minute. Those ads you've seen on KCCI and on WHO, and I got a telephone call the other day from Eagle Grove, and they were all telling me the same thing. They are saying solar customers are not paying their fair share. And my response to that is, solar customers are paying their fair share, and here's why. First of all, if you are going to install solar, you will pay an interconnection fee. Then you'll also pay for solar infrastructure because you have to follow all the rules set up by Alliant and Mid-American and the state of Iowa. Then you'll also pay a monthly service charge. And you will provide excess electricity at the time when it's needed the most and it's the most expensive, and that's in mid to late summer. You will do all of those things. And that excess electricity, what's the value? Well, Todd Miller and I were talking about that this morning. He's the owner of OneSource in Ankeny, where I work, and the value of that is anywhere from 4 to 21 cents per kilowatt hour. So there is value added to the grid by solar users. And if anybody has any questions about that later, I'll be glad to go through that with you. And I think one thing we need to do is we need to establish the value of that extra solar energy. How much does that add? What should that look like? And I don't think we can do that in a week or two. I think we need to take some time and do a study, as they have in Minnesota, in Illinois, in Missouri, in Nevada, and some other states. They have done this, and they have done it right. We need to learn from them. Okay, so my real concern about these proposals is that I am concerned that if these are passed, that they will do a number on farmers and on small businesses and on customers, especially in rural Iowa. And one of the things that we talked about in our last election was we said we wanted to do everything that we could to grow rural Iowa. And we know things are probably going pretty well in Des Moines and Iowa City and Cedar Rapids, but people in rural Iowa are struggling. Well, if these are approved, these will definitely take rural Iowa one step backwards. And you ask why? Well, you look at pork producers, you look at small businesses. This is one way they can control their electricity cost. They can control their electricity costs. They can control, they can control their overhead, and they can survive. Alliant right now is in the process of announcing rate increases of up to 25%. So when we look at this entire picture, we realize that it's very important for small businesses and for farmers and for the average person not to have solar options taken away from them. Now, the interesting point about this is, though, these two bills exempt the larger businesses. Mid-American, Alliant, Apple, Google, Microsoft, they're all exempted. It's okay for them to do whatever they choose to do with solar and to do large scale, but not a person who has pork production in southeastern Iowa, like around Washington where we sold a lot of solar, or not a small insurance agency in Creston or someplace where electricity rates are pretty high. That's not okay, and to me, that's what this is all about. It's very unfair and it's misleading. I'm also concerned about net metering. And some of you may understand net metering, some of you may not. What net metering allows me to do, if I'm a solar customer, is to produce more electricity than I need, especially from May through October, and then to bank it on the grid, and then to pull it back off at night when I don't produce solar and use it, or to pull it back off and use it in the middle of the winter. That's very, very important. If net metering is taken away from solar, it's not nearly as viable. It's not a real good deal.
Net metering, you only are billed for your net energy use. That's where the net in net metering comes
That's
from.
the net part of it. And so my concern is that in the past few years, Mid-American and Alliant have both made a lot of noise about trying to restrict net metering some more, and it's been restricted. It's been come back somewhat, but trying to restrict it or to shut it down. Well, if they do that, a lot of solar energy would go away. A lot of the momentum behind solar would go right out the window, and we don't want that to happen. And I guess my question is this. If net metering is such a bad idea, then why do 40-plus states, plus the District of Columbia, plus 4 territories, plus 4 United States territories, why do they all promote net metering? Go to Germany, go to Europe, and you will see solar all over the place. So solar makes a lot of sense. And I think the other thing we need to consider is this. We have the 16th best solar capacity of any state in the United States, based on our location and based on our infrastructure. Large scale and small scale solar should be able to grow together. It shouldn't just be large scale, because what Mid-American is essentially saying, what they've told us is, yes, we're going to grow large scale solar and you guys can step out of the way. And what I'm saying is that doesn't really make sense. We should be cooperating, we should be supporting each other on that. And I don't see why in Iowa, we talk about growing corn, we talk about growing beans, why can't we grow solar right along with it? And power Iowa and even power states beyond Iowa and make some money off of it. But do it in the right way and do it in a responsible way. And another thing that we need to remember about solar energy is that when we create solar energy, we don't use a lot of extra water. We don't pollute the air. We do that in a more responsible way than by creating electricity through coal power plants or some other ways. So in conclusion, I think we need to push back against these bills as soon as possible and as hard as possible. We need to take the time and determine the value of smaller scale solar, and we need to learn from the other states. We don't want to go backwards. We need to learn from what's happened in states like Nevada, where they went in, they took solar out, and their Republican governor went back in 2017 and said, this is stupid, and replaced not only the 2,600 jobs that have been lost, but now there are between 7,000 and 8,000 people working on solar in Nevada. And if we believe in small businesses, and this isn't just about One Source Solar and solar companies are small businesses in Iowa, but this is not about that. I'm semi-retired. What I believe though is I believe that everybody should be able to grow in solar together, and that it shouldn't be about allowing Mid-American and Alliant to call all the shots. So what do? Well, I think one thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we contact our senators, and it's already passed out of the Senate, but we need to contact our representatives in Iowa and make sure that you talk about some of the things that Jordan and I have talked about today. We have a solar advocacy day on Wednesday, 2 days from now. Come down to that and we'll explain how you can get involved, and we need to keep pushing because we can do this, but it's going to take all hands on deck to get it done. Thank you.
Well, and I'll jump back in here, and then we'll take some questions here shortly. A few points I want to make just about solar in Iowa. It's something that is certainly growing, and I think both Fred and I touched on that. Part of it is trying to weaken this industry and the ability for customers to choose solar now before it grows larger. But right now it's small, but it's growing. It's supporting 800 to 850 jobs in the state. A number of solar businesses that run from sole proprietors to 30, 40, 50 people. You look at companies in Dubuque and Fairfield, Iowa, being very large. North Liberty, Iowa has a very large population of solar installers as well. We're talking about a variety of industries served, agricultural use, pork producers, poultry producers, grain drying is another way people bank up their credits for their solar, and they're able to dry their grain during the harvest season. Businesses, I've been to all manner of businesses that employ it. Churches is another one. It might be a little bit higher calling for why people might choose solar for a church, but local governments, you see it on libraries, schools have large rooftops, if you think about it, and also they're not using a lot of energy in the summer because there's no students there during the summer. It's a great economic situation that allows schools, local governments, businesses to invest those saved funds back into teacher pay, into the students, or into a business where you're going to hire more employees, might be able to offer more benefits. It's growing in the sense that there's solar installations in 99 counties across the state now. A big part of that has been this legislature has, beginning in 2012, I believe, and they've gone back again to make additional improvements to it. Solar tax credit that is half of the amount of the federal tax credit. That's been something that it's used up halfway through the year every year, and people are waitlisted. That's the popularity. Solar group buy programs. You look at communities like Johnson County and Lynn County, where the county governments have partnered with solar installers to do a group purchasing program. The more people who purchase solar, the lower the price for everybody. So when they reach certain amounts of people signing up, everybody gets a discount. Looks like that program is also coming to Waukee. So if you're a member of the Waukee School District, you'll hopefully be eligible. We do know that this legislation could be very detrimental to that, though. But we do want that program and programs like that to be successful. We've seen community solar, where let's say somebody has an apartment building and they can't put their own solar panel on the roof. They can still purchase a share of a solar field and get their bill reduced based on the amount of production from that solar panel. So we're seeing a lot of great things, but I think that's what causes this reaction from the monopoly utilities to make it harder for people to go solar, because every time they interconnect, it means 50% less energy from this customer over their lifetime. And that's the numbers that they're thinking of. But for the Iowans, the churches, the schools, the homes, the people who do this, it's real, it's measurable. It's something that they make a large upfront investment, but they see it pay off over a number of years. And same thing like a business, same thing like a school. A family can take that money and they can put it into other purposes and other practices. So we want to see this industry continue to grow because it serves so many different Iowans. And also, it's something that's reducing our reliance on dirty fuels. And I think that we also have to have an acknowledgement that our utilities in the state, Mid-American still owns or cooperates 6 coal plants in the state. So, you know, this is another way for Iowans to get more of their energy from clean energy and avoid that coal that is still a large part of the portfolio in the state.
Yes.
Sounds like a wonderful idea, but what the politics look like now? What is the general concept there? Is this likely, push through? Is this something that's likely to pass? Is it looking?
So you're talking about the politics? The politics are it's going to come down to the House. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that people put some pressure on people in the House and say, here's why this is bad legislation, this isn't a problem, let's take a little more time, let's determine what the value of solar energy is, let's not rush into this right now. So it's gonna come down to what happens to the House in the next month or so.
Mark?
To that point, though, can I just mention that Jared Klein is one of the representatives from Washington County, and he is a big opponent, a Republican opponent of this bill, in light of the fact that it affects so many of their farmers in Washington County, which has more solar per capita than any other county in the state.
Yes.
So he has been a good ally and somebody that we have been trying to work with to make sure that this doesn't come to the floor. But I'm gonna just be really blatant, it's about a PAC check for Linda Upmeyer. That's what this is
Well,
about.
I know, and I wasn't gonna bring that up, but that's what I've heard,
I'm bringing it up.
that Mid-American contributed a whole bunch of money to her election campaign. Let's put it on the table.
And she told her members point blank, a
Sure.
lot of you wouldn't be here today without Mid-America, remember that. So that's what's going on.
Mark?
That's how blatant
Thank you.
it is.
Why is this a question for our citizen legislators and not our full-time Iowa Utilities Board? Shouldn't they be the ones that address these issues and not the legislators?
Well, I think this is certainly a runaround on that process. I think you might have alluded to it, Fred. We're in the midst of some different pilot programs that are looking into net metering. There was some different changes there where the utilities proposed their own tariffs related to net metering, and we're seeing how those play out now. The appropriate place for the utilities to take this would be the Iowa Utilities Board, where they could propose these tariffs. Their bill, lays out 4 different tariff options. They could bring this to the legislature or bring this to the board and say, this is what we want to try. Let's go through that hearing. Let's go through the process. Let's go through your experts, and we'll figure out what it is.
But what's the law? I mean, if this passed, could somebody sue the legislators and say, this shouldn't have been your issue, it should have been the Iowa Utilities Board?
I'm not sure on the reasoning on that, but what we're seeing that this is about putting it into the political body, and then it's about putting hundreds of thousands of dollars of dark money into a process to try to convince the legislature that these are pertinent arguments, and it's. We saw it, last year with the process as well with energy efficiency. Once again, it's the utilities, practically, writing what they want to see, and they're getting at the legislative level instead of going through the IUB to make massive changes that the IUB has a very clear interest in. So I think it's part of those growing trends that we're seeing.
The one thing that I did hear, Mark, was that the Iowa Utilities Board was upset or concerned a couple of weeks ago when Alliant Energy announced rate increases of up to 25%.
Rick has a question in the back.
Yeah, I do. You mentioned something about jobs, 800, 850 jobs now. What about potential jobs? This is a very small piece of the pie right now, but has great potential for growth. How many total jobs would you predict? I know this would be difficult, but how many total jobs we might lose if we allowed this to happen?
Yeah, I'm not going to make too many a bold number prediction. I will say, once again, referencing back to energy efficiency, we did a survey of energy efficiency contractors, a year out following when the legislation passed, and the number of companies who are considering future layoffs. This was before the board approved those cuts. The number of firms that are considering layoffs, the number of firms that have already had people leave for other states to pursue opportunities. I think we're going to see those impacts. But I think an important number is in 2015, there's around 350 people in the solar industry in the state. So you look at that, in 4 years, we've added 450 to 500 jobs. So, I mean, I think if you kind of look at that trajectory, I mean, that's opportunity lost if it's able to keep growing. But some of these firms are very large. I mean, 30, 40, 50 people, and they're growing. But another caveat, I think this is very important, that a number of these large firms also already have operations in the state of Illinois. And Illinois has a very good program right now for people who want to install solar energy. So it stands to reason that some of these jobs can move easily across the border because the infrastructure of these companies are already there. And it's a real concern for losing some of these largest companies.
Well, to go back to your question, Rick, if these are approved, I can, 850 jobs now, we'll be talking a fraction of that, the jobs that will remain. Because if we can install small-scale solar, like OneSource in Ankeny, we have 13, 15 people working for us. We'd have maybe 2 or 3, we might close our doors. If you take this and you do all these things to solar, a lot of these companies won't survive. And I would say that if we are allowed to continue to do small-scale solar, we could see 2 or 3 or 4 times as many as we have now in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, I know Mid-American and Alliant have said, we'll do large-scale solar. But the problem with the large-scale solar is 86% of the solar jobs in Iowa right now are small-scale solar, 14% are large-scale solar, and there's a very good chance that Mid-American's talking about some large solar farms in central or western Iowa, I'm not sure which, up to 10 megawatts, which is a bunch of solar. But there isn't how do we know that Iowa companies and Iowa workers will install that solar? Some of the solar that's been installed in Iowa in the past has been done by out-of-state workers. We want to keep these jobs here. We want to keep this money here.
Any other questions?
Wanted to mention in California, there are a number of users who are now installing their own battery storage. So they're producing solar energy during the day, using it at night. They're going off the grid. And it seems like eventually that's going to come to Iowa as battery storage becomes ever better. There should be some of they're losing customers.
Yeah, certainly, battery storage is going to be a revolutionary thing that's going to come. But we should say, for the purposes of this conversation, distributed solar is a term that energy is produced closest to the source that it's used. So the customers affected by this bill, they are on the grid. They are tied to the grid. They're still utility customers. In an off-the-grid situation, you're producing all of your own energy, and without grid assistance, you're not sending anything back. I mean, that's something that I think does have a future, and that's got to be scary to utilities, obviously. But if you keep doing moves like this, I mean, it's going to be something that people are going to explore. I think that the grid is such a vitally important thing. It's big. It's intercontinental. It's large. And people who are these small-scale solar producers are doing their part. They're putting energy back on the grid. As Fred mentioned, they're often not being reimbursed at a rate
At the voided cost.
or a rate that's their utility is able to turn around and sell it more. Solar installations on the grid, they provide stability to the grid. There's less line loss. The extra energy that you're producing is mostly going to the people who are closest to you.
Yeah,
That's where the electron
going to your neighbor.
is going. So, I think that, we need to recognize the value that these small-scale distributed solar installations bring. But, I think that, more people are going to think about options if they're, only, their best economical option to do solar is to do something with battery storage. Some people are going to explore it, but, I think that's probably even a higher economic hurdle for people than, just a residential solar system. But, 5, 10 years, I mean, things are moving fairly fast. We'll see how that goes. I know there's some innovative projects here in Iowa, down in Fairfield, with one of the solar companies that's doing a very large solar installation with some peak shaving battery potential. So those are things to certainly look at. But for these purposes, these customers are still utility customers, but they're utility customers who want to pay less and they want to use their money on other things. And that's what net metering, and that's why it's so important to get that compensation for the energy that they're producing, and to see those savings following a large investment that you made as an individual or as a business.
And they don't want to see their electricity cost continue to go up. And over the past 30 years or so, the average rate of inflation for electricity costs has been 3.2 to 3.4%. So they just continue to escalate, and that's what solar is all about. Solar is all about planning, and solar is all about investing in the future, and then also being treated fairly.
You touched on how solar users pay the grid, pay interconnection fees and monthly service charges. I do have people ask me about
Yeah, sure.
that commercial.
Yes.
That
That
we
commercial's
pay
a very,
for that.
that commercial's a very slick commercial.
And is it a lie, or is there? Well, I'm looking for
Well,
somebody to tell me that it's a lie.
here's the thing. If I install solar for you, you're going to pay an interconnection fee.
Okay.
No getting around
To
that.
you or to my?
To your
Utility.
utility. You won't pay it to
Okay.
me, but you will pay it.
Okay,
You will also pay a monthly service charge,
okay, just like everybody
just
else.
like everybody else. And you're also going to, you may have to update what you have in terms of meters or lines or whatever else. That's all,
My cost.
that's your cost. So you'll pay all those things, plus you're providing extra electricity
To the neighbors.
to the neighbors at a time when it's needed most and it's the most expensive, which is going to be that 1st of July to the end of August timeframe. And it could even be into June. And the value of that extra electricity is anywhere from 4 to 21 cents depending per kilowatt hour, depending on where you live in the United States. It's going to be more expensive on the East Coast and the West Coast. Here, it's probably going to be 10, 12, 13 cents a kilowatt hour.
So the line, they're not paying for use of the lines, you're paying for them.
That's not true.
That's the lie. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
what I needed.
Well, and
A lie.
well, absent, I think, in this debate has been those actual numbers being presented of what the actual grid costs are. I think we're owed to see what those actual wear and tear costs are supposedly. And really, yeah, and other states' value of solar study will take into account the costs, will take into account the benefits, but what we've seen time and time again in states that have studied this is that those benefits outweigh the cost, and that the utilities are able to pick up extra revenue on the fact that there are solar customers on their lines.
And what are the benefits of cleaner energy? Energy that uses less water and also energy that doesn't pollute the air.
Did you also mention that the excess solar I produce on my solar panels goes back into the grid, they buy it at a lower rate and sell it at a
Yes,
higher rate?
yes,
Nobody's
yes.
even talking about that.
Well,
And
they're
that's important too.
going to buy that. They're going to buy that. Let's say it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour, or 11 cents a kilowatt hour on Mid-American. If you don't use that in a certain time frame, they're going to buy it for 2.5 cents. They just made 7 or 8 cents on that per kilowatt hour. even if you go back and use it, you're using it at night, and you're using that during the middle of the winter when that electricity isn't expensive. They made money on that. So I think it's pretty difficult to say that solar users are freeloaders, because they're not, they're contributing clean energy. And I guess the other part of this is, why should the largest companies in Iowa be able to do this, but the pork producer in Washington County or in Union County where I grew up, he can't do it,
Okay, we're
if this legislation goes through.
Representative Williams.
No. I'll be glad to talk to you about it, Mike.
They're taking questions.
To build on Representative Masher's question, what percent of solar is pushed back to the grid? Of all that's generated, what's pushed back?
Oh, I had a number somewhere, I don't know if I can dig it out for you now, but I mean, we're talking what actually goes back onto the grid. I mean, you're talking fractions of a percent that's actually going back onto the grid for consumption by other customers. It's pretty small in the long run of things. I mean, obviously, that's being, a percentage of that is being consumed, at the source, and then some is being sent back out. But it's not bank breaking. It's a small percentage right now that's going back out.
And what's the average solar user? How much do they buy off the grid?
Well, it depends on the system. They're sized. Some systems will offset 50%. Offsetting truly 100% is not really all that common. There's quite a bit of
The most you can do on Alliant, which is where we sell most of our solar. We don't sell that much solar to Mid-American customers because Mid-American is less expensive. Most you can do on Alliant is 85%. And what we always try to encourage people to do is to be as efficient as possible before they do solar.
Mike Rathbell has a question.
There's a hundred different arguments to make, and I didn't come here to debate all of those arguments. I'd be happy to if people have questions. Reach out, every one of you, reach out and touch that cable. Just reach out and touch it. Okay? You've all touched that cable. That's what solar owners want to be able to do, is touch that grid. Depart from there to your house. That is the monthly fee of $8.50. That doesn't pay a dime for that main line. Doesn't pay a dime for that. That's the part we pay for with the monthly fee. So people conflate a lot of different things into this equation. It's all said and done. The largest companies in the state of Iowa, they don't use net metering. It doesn't matter to them. This legislation has zero impact on them because they were never rolling the meters backwards, because they wanted the credit for having a small carbon footprint. So that's what that language does. It doesn't exempt them from this law. They exempt themselves by not attempting to run the meter backwards. But once you need this, right? If you're solar, you need this. Now,
Unless you have battery.
and if you have a battery, you're not running the meter backwards. You don't need it.
Right, that's
You
what
do
I'm
not need it. You're free. You can produce all the energy you want at your home if you're going to use it all. All of that yourself. But if everybody that touched this cable did connect to solar, and this was the entire state of Iowa, and they sized their systems to use the existing, to supply their own needs, they still need the grid. If it's dark at night, who pays for that line? If everybody does it, who pays for that line? So the only other point I would make is, I floor managed the legislation that put in the code in 1983, requirement to do 2% alternative energy in the state of Iowa. And between 1983 and 2003, nothing happened. Zero. And then we said, and Mid-Am had cited a new plant, and Tom Vilsack went to him and said, I want your help doing green energy, helping with wind. And we went from essentially zero in the last 15 years, is that right, 16 years? From essentially zero to, at the end of next year, 100% wind, because we let Mid-Am own it. I believe, and building trades, my name is Mike Bronstone, I represent the Iowa State Building Trades. I believe there will be more jobs. Mid-Am is empowered to get into this, and why do they want to get into it?
No.
I'm sorry, I try not to interrupt you, okay? Why does Mid-America want to get into it? I almost said marijuana. They got that legislation going this year too. Because their customers, like Google and Facebook, want to assure that they have corporate policies to get to a zero carbon footprint. So Mid-Am wants to aggressively engage in this. But if every installation they put in on top of Menards, on top of the local school, on top of municipal buildings, if everything they put in pulls money off of this because they're running the meters backwards, nobody's going to maintain the grid. Costs, scores of millions of dollars every year to maintain that grid. Nothing will happen. So I'm sorry.
This is why I'm really upset with labor. This is why. We usually partner and we look at renewable energy as a good thing for Iowa. And we want to incent it. I didn't interrupt you. And so we want to incent it. And we want to have more people do that so we don't have to build additional power plants. That's what Mike is talking about. This is all an attempt for us to be able to be more green in this state. And to me.
And to be a leader.
Exactly. Bingo.
And I guess my concern about, I know Mike and I respect him, but my concern about what he said is what's good for Google, what's good for Microsoft, what's good for Apple should be good for pork producers in Washington County, Iowa, and for small businesses.
So is the cost of this line that I'm touching, is that not covered by my monthly service charge? That's just from there to here?
No.
Of course it is.
No, it isn't.
Well, then what about that profit that they're making? I mean, they're making
I respectfully disagree because it is.
$605 million in profit in 2018. How are they making that profit out of this line that I want to touch?
And the other thing that I want to point out is that we can say everybody in Iowa is going to do this. Well, everybody is not going to spend $30, $50, $60, $100,000 on solar. It is an investment.
I think Dave has something to say.
Yes.
The specific answer to your question is the transmission and distribution cost is covered under energy cost adjustment on your bill.
Transmission, say that one more time.
Transmission and distribution costs are covered under the energy cost adjustment on your bill. And I don't know why, but that's the way they do it.
So this is paid for somehow.
Oh, sure.
And you know what, I would be probably more in support of this if there was 50% of us were getting solar. Because their profits would be lower and it would be more difficult for Mid-American to keep up with the infrastructure. Okay, that's fine. They would eventually have less excess of the millions of dollars as time goes on. But once you get to 50% or 50% solar, how wonderful would that be? And then if we're taxed to pay for some of that infrastructure, fine. But right now, when there's less than 1%, seems ridiculous to me.
Yep, back there.
What are other states doing, and what are other states doing that have been successful and are looking successful? Because I think it's an issue with every state, it isn't just us. So do we know, what's worked for other states? Because I mean, we've got a utility, and we've had, this utility that is not owned by the state, they're gonna make a profit. And that's what businesses do. And I'm also very much in agreement, we simply do not want to end up with killing off the solar. God's sake, that's what we're going at. And especially if we're seeing all this flooding going on, we know we've got to do it. So what's happening?
Yeah. Let's talk about the study.
Well, yeah, and one second too, Representative Stade, did you want to say anything?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, well, I would say, in terms of other states, we mentioned it before, a value of solar study, I think, is a very important thing for us to do. From a value of solar comes a value of solar rate that can determine what a solar customer should be fairly compensated for. We need to actually know these costs, know the benefits, and that's been so void from this argument. Let us see what those actually are in the state, and let the IUB take a crack at putting this out and getting us something that's real.
The
That's
Iowa Utilities Board. is
Sorry,
what he's talking about.
yep, the Iowa Utilities Board. Let it take it away from this political process. Put it to the experts. Let us see what it actually is for these costs and benefits. But I'd look at another state example, community solar in Minnesota. I mentioned that earlier as a model where utility will put up a large solar field, and you as a customer can buy shares or portions. You can say, I want 4 panels in this field, I want a half a panel in this field, and that will help you directly reduce your rates. But also, you can talk about utility scale solar being important and big, and I'm sure there'll be something that's featured in all of Mid-American's commercials in forever now once they build their utility scale solar. But that's not directly reducing a customer's bills. If a customer wants to take an action, the community solar is a way that they can do that, and the utility would still be in control of that infrastructure.
And as far as other states and what they've done, I think we need to take a look at what's been done in Minnesota, where you can be paid 8 cents for every kilowatt hour that you produce of solar energy. Look at Illinois, look at Missouri, look at Nevada and what they've done, and we need to learn from them instead of jumping into this and saying, boom, we're gonna pass these. I think we need to take a little more time. I think we need to be thoughtful.
I'm gonna wrap this up.
Yes.
And let Art State have the last
Yes.
say,
That's unusual.
because he tried earlier.
So a question, if they're able to get electricity from solar producers, particularly small scale, at a very cheap price, you would think that would profit them to do that, and when they're selling it back at a higher price, that would be a good business plan. I would think so. So the more of those, the more that they would make in profits in terms of that. The second thing is, when you bank these, so you provided and you've banked it, are those reconciled each year, or does that go on infinitum? So if you have produced excess, you lose it at the end of the year?
It's reconciled at the end. Well, a lot of people reconcile at the end of April.
But you don't get money, it's just
Well,
against your net.
if you have excess electricity and it's 10 or 12 cents per kilowatt hour, you're gonna get 2.5 cents credit. So
2.5 for
they
12.
just made some money on that.
So they do that every year as well? at the
Yeah,
end of the
and basically what solar users want to do is they want to use their own electricity, because then they pay 10 cents a kilowatt hour for it on Mid-American, and they're able to use that, so they get their 10 cents back. That's the whole basis behind net metering.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. You know, progressives don't always agree on everything, and that's why we come and we learn from each other and we listen. So thank you so much for being here. Hope you'll be back next week.
Sounds like
I just kind of
Not when they become conservative.